To the show today. My name is Marissa Lather, and I am standing in for Brianna Smith. I'd like to say thank you to Stephanie for being our behind the scenes tech guru. And I'd like to welcome you all to the Midwest Digital Marketing Conference podcast. And today we're going to be speaking with Kevin Farr of Centered. So my name's Marissa. I'm a marketing manager at Proficient. And if anybody follows me online at Marketer Marissa, you know that I am fascinated by all things innovation and creativity. So I'm really excited to talk to our guest today. Kevin is not your typical business person. He's an artist, a strategist, and a stakeholder capitalist. He's been a student and practitioner of the arts, business philosophy, and organizational behavior for over 15 years. His clients include Apple, Beats by Dre, Microsoft, Logitech, FDA, American Red Cross, Fox News, HBO, Showtime, Comedy Central. You guys, I could go on. We've got Schreiber Foods, Procter Gamble, a lot more, as well as many small and mid-sized startups, and acts as a boutique to global agencies. He loves working with teams that are curious about options and possibilities for how innovation can lead to change, growth, and opportunities. And I would like to turn it over to Kevin. How are you?
Thank you. I'm well. This is an awesome opportunity. I want to say thanks to everyone at Midwest Digital Marketing Conference for putting this together, and honored and humbled to be part of a discussion. It's a fun topic, and couldn't have a better interviewer because you've got background in innovation and change. So
well, thank
wonderful.
you. Yeah. This is really exciting. I mean, we've already been having quite the conversation.
Yeah.
So we're just going to invite everybody else to dive right in with us. Before we get started, though, if you want to ask a question, go ahead and ask it in the Q&A portion of the comments, and we'll get to those at the end of the podcast. So let's go ahead and get started. Kevin, the hard-hitting questions. What would you say to somebody who might say that innovation and strategy is a waste of time?
Oh, I love that. Well, it depends on the person, the organization, and the context of the conversation. For some people, will say, "Great," and if you change your mind, give us a call, or we're happy to make recommendations to someone that can help you when you're ready to explore the possibility space. For other executives that we work with, a lot of times we see that response coming from a place of when I say competency, I don't mean that in a pejorative way or a way to say that they don't have skill sets. More like innovation is a competency. There is science behind it. There's creativity. There's process. So sometimes there's just a lack of understanding of how it works and a fear of a new thing. And there's this impulse of let's just do what we've always done because we know that works. Or there's an assumption that it works without any evidence that it actually works. And so there's a type of cognitive entrenchment in what is familiar. So oftentimes when we bump into that dismissal of the benefits of innovation or change, we use a technique where we say, okay, we totally understand that and respect where you're coming from. How about we do a 90-minute workshop and let's just talk about that. Let's talk about why innovation is a waste of time. And so we'll create an experience for the executive team to help them walk through their own assumptions about why something wouldn't work. And what we're trying to do is really play with, there's one of our partners at Big White Sky. I love this term that Jeremy has where he talks about mental aperture. How wide can we expand our understanding of what could be and move away from what can't be? And so part of what we'll do in these workshops is try to get people, to see, okay, potentially it may not work or potentially it's a waste of time, but what's the evidence for that? Where's that assumption coming from? And if we were to suspend that for a second, what other possibilities could there be in terms of the benefits of innovation?
Well, I know if you're hanging out with the guys at Big Wide Sky, then we've got a lot of innovation and creativity happening. So here's a question for you. Why is innovation so hard?
Yes. So, well, it's hard if we think it's hard. And that definitely is a perspective. It's how we approach the problem. It's how we approach the process and how we frame things up. And when I think about the word hard, that can be interpreted in different ways. Innovation can require work. It can require sophisticated thinking. It can also happen very quickly and be emergent. Hard can sometimes be a way that we all think about the situation that we're in, and it can also be a way that we mentally block ourselves from change. Well, that's just really hard. We don't want to do that, or that's going to take too much time. And a lot of those signals that we get from teams about something being hard or not wanting to do it, we see that as kind of the first layer of an assumption about what's going on at the organization. A lot of times there's a root cause problem underneath that description or characterization of something being hard. And when we get down below that, we might find out that they're like, we have resource constraints and we're really scared to take a risk. So hard actually is really about fear and really about risk. So hard for us is really about unpacking what that actually means for people and recognizing why have they formed up or framed up that type of perspective over what innovation is or isn't. And our goal is to really help them settle into, what does innovation mean for your organization, given your culture, your conditions, your market, your financial position, your competitive advantage, whatever the climate and the circumstance might be. Let's help you understand what innovation means for you versus just having an assumption about what it broadly or generalizing what it is or what it isn't for all people or all organizations, or even making an assumption about what it is or isn't for your organization without trying to really dig in and discover what is the potential of innovation for what we need in our firm.
Gosh, there are so many things I could say after that. I think one thing that I heard is that, change and innovation strategy that can go for businesses of all sizes in all industries. So what are some of the common assumptions that people have when it comes to thinking that change or innovation is hard? What are some of those inaccuracies?
Yeah, good question. So time is one of the most common ones. So we see time, competency, resources. How long will this take? Do we have the competency for it? Do we have the resources for it? And nested inside of those areas are assumptions about usually something about fear and risk. So a common one is, well, what if this fails? And our response to that is, well, what if you do nothing? What are the effects of just absolutely doing nothing? And so what we see is that we've had projects that are with pre-seed startups, super small. They're $500,000 in size, $750,000 in size, and we've done work all the way up to work with United States Soy, with Microsoft. We've got media clients, and in all of those environments, there's this is going to be a gross generalization, but there's kind of two kind of camps of mental models. And there's, openness to change and possibility. And there's an understanding of risk and fear, but acknowledgement that that's just part of the landscape, so to speak. And then there's like deep cognitive entrenchment in fear and risk. And so those are common that we see across just organizations in general, whether we're in the nonprofit space, government space, dealing with commodities. And that's just a very human thing. So what we tend to look at is that each organization has a belief structure, and that's common across all organizations. They have a story that they tell themselves about how things are. And that's also a really human thing. We all have narratives in our mind about who we are and what we do and what roles we play out. And those are common across all teams and organizations. So what we really try to do is understand in each organization, what's the belief system that is driving a lot of their decision making? How is that informing what they're doing? And so with that understanding, behind the scenes, we recognize that we're going to see a pattern of just how human behavior emerges, power structures emerge, how politics emerge, how resources are emerged, how people position things, and that we see across all organizations. And then what we do is try to get into the narrative of how did this specific narrative emerge in this organization at this time period with this group.
So it sounds like it's a very personalized process, would you say?
Yes, actually, our firm is designed intentionally to be very small, and very intimate. So we use lean management practices. We've got a group of managing partners that are owners in the firm. And then we use a very, very broad dynamic network of partner firms like predictive analytics firms or IoT firms. We've got creative partners. We've got analysts, we've got economists, we've got different PhDs and other MBAs that we work with. And what we do is the managing partners are the strategic leads for the firm. We look at growth, we look at clients, we do business development, we do a lot of the strategy and the problem solving for the clients, and we put teams around these problems, and they're customized. Some of our teams can be 3 people, some of them can be up to a dozen or even larger, depending on how many partner firms are in the mix. But we ultimately customize the solution for every problem that we face or every opportunity we have to create that is relevant for the firm and the team and their problem. So even though we have what we'll call kind of a service architecture, which is this big, you can kind of think of it like a big knowledge tree of different tools and frameworks that we know work, that we've worked on and they're research based. We've worked with the creators of them. They come from usually what we'll call applied science out of business schools, and we'll take those frameworks and we'll customize them to the problem that the firm is having. And we do this every time. So every solution we provide, every analysis that we create is designed specifically for that firm, and then that firm owns that documentation. And that's part of how we build competency, is we really design proposals, scope of works, solutions, any type of analytical or quantitative modeling that we do is all customized for that firm. Now we've got kind of behind the scenes processes and ways that we approach things that is a framework for how we as managing partners and teams will diagnose problems. But in terms of deliverables and solutions that we provide to the client, those are all customized for every engagement. And so that allows us to be very, very intimate and spend a lot of time picking apart the layers of problems to get down to the root cause, because our goal is to avoid as best as possible a firm looping through the same problem with us. Our goal is, can we solve a problem for you as fast as possible or create an opportunity as fast as possible? Get you some level of competency and self-sufficiency in that, and then have you run with it, and then come back to us for the next problem. So our projects are usually short engagements, high impact. We're usually going to be in a room with executives for a week, a couple weeks, maybe a few days, and our projects can be 4 weeks long, 8 weeks long. Even some of our longer projects that might take place over a year period are going to be these like sprints of work. There's going to be like a project that's going to inform kind of another project, and then we're going to inform another project. And so the work happens in modules, but it's always very deliberate, very intentional, and very customized.
Okay. Let's get a little tactical here. So me as an employee, what can I do to help my company or my team start to innovate?
I would say first ask the question of why innovation? Why gravitate towards that? There's an interesting thing about how we as humans work. We're really good at recognizing patterns, and we're really good at repeating processes. This is a thing that we've done really well as a species, is coordinate through language and symbols and other ways of communicating what we want to do and how we want to do it. The flip side of that is that creates repetition for the sake of repetition. And this is where buzzwords come from, and this is where trends come from. It's like, let's be agile, right? And it's like, let's it's all about change management, and then it's about lean, and it's like, okay, all of these tools and frameworks are very, very effective if we recognize when to use them. So the first thing about innovation is, why are we gravitating towards that? What are we actually trying to solve? Are we just caught in this industry inertia where everyone's like, innovate, change, innovate, change, innovate, change? When the reality is, as a kind of reality is, so to speak, that we all exist in, is constantly changing. We've always been experiencing that. Now the rate of change, is depending on what research you look at, the rate of change and the let's say the options available for types of change, in terms of product development and technology available, that's becoming, there's more diversity in that area. But this idea that like we have to change or we have to innovate, I'd first say, well, let's start with that assumption of where's that coming from. Then the next step underneath that can be, okay, well, if we do need to change, what is the actual problem that we're trying to solve? And to get people together to first identify that there actually is a problem. And that's the same thing that you see in a lot of the research and evidence over effective change management in general. Is people actually all agree on the problem they're trying to solve. And to start with that, you'd want to get everybody in a room and say, is everybody interpreting the same evidence? Is everyone seeing the same data? So let's take, for instance, agencies that are downstream tactical agencies. Their margins are declining. From our perspective, the conventional agency model is in the process of that type of industry is in the process of dying. And I don't mean like it's going to go away. I just mean the way that it used to operate is now completely changing. You've got consultancies merging with creative firms. You've got, McKinsey now has like human-centered design, and you've got Deloitte buying up every creative resource they possibly can in Los Angeles. So, with this type of change, a lot of the downstream tactical agencies, their margins are declining because they are really just executing. And sometimes when we work with partner firms, there's almost a denial that their industry is changing. There's a denial that that ultimately, if you forecast out over a long enough time horizon, when you're at a 30% margin and you're down to a 20, then you get down to a 15, and now you're down at you're down at 13, now you're down at 8. Well, if you can't get everybody in a room to agree, hey, we have declining margins, there's something changing in our landscape, perhaps we need to analyze what's going on here, think about what the services we're providing, you're not really going to be able to innovate or change. So ultimately, once you can acknowledge why you need to change, then it's, well, what are we trying to change? And then once you can get down to, well, what are we trying to change? Okay, what's causing that problem? And if you can start to get people to go through those layers of awareness over what is the problem, why is it emerging, what are options for what we can do, then if everybody can agree on that, you can really start to open up the possibility space for what are potential solutions, what's within our core competency, what do we do with our resources if we do need to change.
I mean, all of those questions, they sound like you need a coach, frankly. Uh-oh, I almost made him spit out coffee, folks.
No, it's funny because we've had people joke with us, like with some of so we have organizational behaviorists and strategists, and I've studied a lot of human behavior. My first master's was in human behavior, and then I have an MBA. And so people have joked with us where they've been in sessions with us, and they come out and they'll be like, God, that just felt like therapy. Or we've had like executives go like, how did you profile all of our people like that? And I'm like, well, we use psychological profiling tools, but at the same time, like we are really helping people kind of unpack. And I laughed and almost spit out my drink because it's funny because people have said that to us before. So,
well, I think that's what's really cool is it's like you guys have the access to, all of the technology expertise, programs that, the average business might not have, availability to use. And so, I'm thinking like now that you have, so me, again, as a marketing manager, I know that I have some type of challenge that we could get better at, but I don't know how to get there. Maybe we've tried doing the same old thing over and over and it's not working. So how do I go to my executives and try and make a case for, hey, maybe we should work with an innovation expert, or maybe we should try something different. And I don't even know what that is, but I just know we should try something different,
Yeah, I love that question. It makes me think of an analogy that we've used with quite a few executive teams. So we've had executive teams that are very conservative. We're talking decades of intentionally hiring very conservative, risk-adverse people because it was right for the conditions that the organization emerged in. And they'll come to us and say, like, we've been trying to drive all this change and we're telling people to innovate and they just don't understand how to do it. And we don't know what to do. And there'll usually be like one manager that's really like spearheading that initiative. And there's you could just tell that like they're passionate about it and they're also emotionally drained. And they're like, how do I do this? And one of the analogies that we've come up with is we, say to them, okay, imagine that you had to wake up tomorrow and you couldn't put on the same clothes, you couldn't eat the same food. In fact, you couldn't repeat one single pattern that you repeated the day before, what would you do? One of the most common responses we get is, I go back to bed, because it's like, okay, so now imagine when you tell people to change and without giving them the tools needed for that, that's how people are going to feel. So they're going to resist it, or they're just going to throw their hands up like, I don't know how to do this. So when we talk to executives that are trying to bring change into the organization and they go, how do I do this? People don't understand. One of the ways that we often approach that is evidence. We go right for analysis. And this is where we nerd out on how much data can we get our hands on to start to highlight what's happening in the organization. Part of our approach as a firm is system thinking. So we are super nerdy into system dynamics. A lot of that system dynamics was started in the manufacturing industry. It's now moved its way into organizational behavior and strategy. And a lot of what we do is kind of think about, there's Carl Weick's research on sense making and shared cognition, which means everybody in an organization builds this type of shared cognition or this shared understanding or story about what's happening at the firm. And this builds a belief structure, it builds processes, it builds financial models. It's how they design everything that they do. And if you do that long enough, it gets built into the firm's memory. It becomes almost unconscious for everybody. Well, this is just what we do. So when you're trying to come in and disrupt that with change, people have to actually almost emotionally embrace that, or it's going to feel threatening, and they won't even really identify it as a threat. So oftentimes evidence is very objective. Data can be very objective. And so we'll start with, okay, let's pick an area where we want to look for evidence of the problem that you think needs to be innovated. And let's not say what needs to happen with the problem. Let's just highlight the evidence of the trend or the experience that the customers might be having, or if something happening with technology, whatever it might be. We go right for data and we start building models. Then we'll say, okay, let's take the person who wants to lead change. Let's see if we can come in and have a short session, 60 minutes, 90 minutes, with a group of executives that you're trying to create change with. And let's just present the evidence and let everybody express their interpretation and assumptions about why things are happening. And they might look at that evidence and go, oh, whoa. Or they might start to try to dismiss it. The cool part about it is no matter what people say, they're going to give you more evidence of what's going on inside the organization. And we whiteboard, we have a whole system for how we take all the assumptions that people have about the evidence that we provide, and we put this all on a board. And there's a whole structure for it. And we walk people through this system diagram at the end, and we look at all the patterns and we go, look, there's 5 of you in the room, 6, and we'll usually have an analyst in the room that quickly quantifies, hey, you've made this comment, 65% of the discussion today has had this topic in it. But when we try to talk about solving this problem, there seems to be some assumptions that that problem doesn't exist, but you're talking about it a lot. Let's talk about that cognitive dissonance. So what we try to do is start bringing together the evidence, the assumptions, and potentially the root cause of the problem, and let people just feel their way through that so they can feel safe with what change looks like. And those are typically where we see organizations and change agents being able to create some change, because they're not trying to force it. They're not trying to mandate it. They're actually letting people become familiar with the problem, emotionally work through it, and then accept that there is a problem or an opportunity to create, because it's not always just a problem. Sometimes it's just an opportunity, but people still have to say, like, yeah, we want to go after that opportunity. We're okay with that. So people have to be kind of put into an experience where they feel psychologically safe to express why they're rejecting change or innovation, or why they have some trepidation or apprehension about pursuing it. Once you can create that psychological safety, you can start to peel back, okay, what do we actually do with this evidence over what the problem is or what the opportunity could be.
Oh my gosh, to be a fly on the wall in that room. My gosh. Okay. I know we said we were going to do questions at the end, but I'm going to prepare you. You're going to have to share some of the resources that you shared with me, because I think our audience would be really interested in that. So prepare to do that at the end. But we actually have a question in from my girl, Bonnie Frank. She asks, what's the biggest pushback for companies regarding working with innovation specialists? And then how can we, being the workers at the company, help combat this?
Oh, yeah, so we see that kind of that resistance come up in a couple different ways. We do half of our clients are other agencies, and you could kind of consider us to be back of house innovation for them. So they're trying to grow new service lines or develop new service lines. They ultimately want to become more like business consultants, and they want to go further upstream with problem solving. They want to get paid for strategy. They want to get paid for the thinking, not just the execution. So in that environment, sometimes the agencies get very curious about us, and then we start looking at some of the evidence, and all of a sudden they're like, we can do this. Or there's a resistance of, we know what we're doing, right? And there's like a starting to walk towards the edge, the precipice of the problem, the acknowledgement of it, and then a pulling back of we can do this. So with some of our agency prospects, we see some of that occurring. Some of our best agency clients are the ones that walk right through that fear and go, we don't know how to do this. This is what we know how to do really well, but we're really open to being taught how to do this. Sometimes with the brand firms, we see a concern over cost, timing, and whether things will work or not. Oh, I want a guarantee, and our response would be, well, what can you ever guarantee in life? Things don't work that way. And so we oftentimes see an assumption that, well, we need a guarantee of an ROI. And it's like, okay, well, we can model that out for you. We can come up with probabilistic models that say, well, if you go this direction, there's 65% chance you might get a $1.2 million return, and you go this direction, it's a 70% chance. But ultimately, all of those are assumptions that help shape the potential of what something could be. It's not a guarantee. So with organizations that might have some fear that they, over the risk of change, or, a challenge that they have the competency, a lot of times we'll just walk away from projects. And it's not, we've turned down quite a bit. It's an interesting discussion as managing partners, the amount of projects that we've turned down. And a lot of it has to do with readiness. From a business development standpoint, we also are a business that has to stay alive and thrive and be healthy. So there is an understanding and a sensitivity that sometimes you just walk away and you provide people resources and you say, if you're open to this, keep talking to us. And sometimes we walk away and we say that this might not be the right firm, or we can connect you with other firms. I know that's not the cleanest answer for that question because it's like, I know as business people, we're always like, how do we do this? How do we get in? How do we solve this? And sometimes there's just a sensitivity of like, people just aren't, they just aren't ready. They just aren't open, and trying to force it in puts a huge cost on the firm trying to sell it in. And this is something that we as Centered as a firm has done a lot of analysis on this. And we took data. Two of us that manage the firm have worked at big agencies, midsize and small. So we looked at data from what happens in organizations that aren't ready for change. And the firm trying to sell in change, by the time you win the project, you get a portion of it and you're upside down in terms of return because you spend so much time trying to convince people of something. So we discern, we try to be very deliberate over discerning, are people ready? Why might they be resisting? And at what point do we just walk away? Or just leave the door open and say, like, we're here if you need us, but let us know when you want to continue the conversation, and we'll keep coffees going and lunches and meeting up and checking in with them, but we'll let them kind of go through their own process, kind of like a parent letting a kid fall down a bunch.
Well, to echo your point, I believe Proshi, they said that the number one key to success for change management is executive buy-in. And so if you can't get that, again, you're just going to be wasting your time and everybody's energy and probably patience too. So
that's why we do not, we only work with executive teams. And that's something when we set the firm up, and we've said no to projects that come in at mid-level. And a lot of that has to do with, if we get brought in by a director and we say, we'd like to meet with the executive team, and they say the executive team's not interested, we know right away, this is not for us. And so you hit a great point, which is, we contract with the executive team. We run our workshops with the executive team. We provide our modeling and all of our solution design to the executive team. We may train or have directors and VPs that are in those sessions, but everything we're doing is coming in through executives, because we recognize that the mental model of the executive team creates the leadership style, which creates how they make decisions, which creates all kinds of processes and deliverables and incentive models underneath that. So if we're thinking about sustainable change, if we're thinking about growing competency, you're totally right that getting the executives to agree and align is going to have a huge impact on whatever initiative you try to carry through the entire organization.
Well, I could probably keep talking to you for hours, but we're going to save some of it for your MDMC session.
Yeah.
Um, but right now, let's take a quick sneak peek at what you can expect from the 2019 MDMC. Oh my gosh, it looks like
Rock
so
and
much
roll.
fun.
Yeah.
I cannot wait. So you're hosting a breakout session called The Organic Properties of Growth. What can we expect from that?
Something very organic, something very
Well played.
um, so the impetus for creating the presentation came from work that was done before Centered was started in different environments with different types of clients, and then it had a lot to do with what we wanted Centered to be when it was created. There's this insatiable demand in a lot of businesses to grow for the sake of growth. Just grow, fast money, right? Hit that quarterly goal. And you see this translate into what happens on Wall Street, and you see this into it happen in terms of how analysts look at publicly traded companies, and then pressure from the street comes into those firms about growth. And even with as much control as humans have put into nature, we are part of a very organic system. We are on a living, breathing planet. We are inside of a system that is dynamic in terms of how humans interact, and things happen organically, and they change regularly. And even though people want an assurity that things will turn out a certain way, that's just not how things in life work. We can sometimes have a prediction through modeling that might turn out, and other times it's like, wow, that financial report was way off. And if you analyze a lot of projections that companies make about what they're going to do in a year, I mean, the numbers are all over the place. But somehow there's this this insatiable appetite of grow and hit that number and get it done this way. That creates sometimes bad behavior in companies to hit that goal, to force a certain outcome, or other times it creates paralysis, fear that they're not going to hit a certain goal or a certain outcome. So the talk is really about understanding and really just embracing and acknowledging, like, look, things can be complicated and sophisticated inside of organizations. Human behavior is really dynamic. So growth, when we think about the organic properties of growth, is really starting with how humans interact and how we shape up our perspective over what's happening inside of an organization. And the way that each person approaches a problem is going to affect how they interpret the problem, the way that they try to solve it. It's going to affect the outcomes. An example of this is if I mentally anchor in and say, well, social media is just about vanity metrics, so just focus on vanity metrics. Well, then that's all you're going to get is vanity metrics. But if you go, well, what other potential possibilities are there for social media inside of our business model? Is it for customer service? Is it for research? You start opening up the possibility space, and that's the beautiful thing about the organic aspects of kind of the reality that we live in, is where we put our attention impacts what we see, and what we see affects what we interpret, and how we interpret things affects what we do with what we're interpreting. So the talk is really about understanding how those mental models get formed over what we interpret, and then how to actually create change. A lot of the research that informs this talk comes from Anjan Thacker out of WashU and Bob Quinn out of Ross Business School. And there's some other frameworks that we'll bring in, but this is really about looking at, if you understand the mental model of leaders, which you can use different profiling tools and different ways of research to understand that, to help an organization understand what their mental model is. And then you can look at how they're actually designed. Are we highly competitive? Are we very much about process? Are we very much about culture? Are we about creativity? And once you start to understand organically, like how are we operating? What are we doing? What type of artifacts and processes and thoughts are moving around in this organization? Then you can go, well, what type of growth is right for us? An example of this is if you take a desert plant and put it in the jungle, it's not going to grow at all. It's going to die. So if you try to force a type of growth into an organization that's not relevant for the climate and conditions of that organization, it's not going to survive. So the organic properties of growth is really what is natural and organic to our organization. And if we're going to try to grow something completely new, do we have the right environment to do that? And if we don't, then what do we do about that? Or if based on our environment and our conditions, what are the growth strategies that would grow really well in our conditions and in our environment? So the people that will come to this type of talk are typically going to be people that either can have some influence on change or are really curious about change and innovation, or executive leaders that want to understand very specific options for growth strategy. So even though right now we're kind of talking in a nebulous way, there's going to be some specific models and tools that I'll present that'll provide a way of discerning what's happening in the organization, and then what do we do about it if we want to create some innovation and change.
Well, first of all, your analogies are very helpful. I think, I'm just picturing that little cactus, struggling in the rainforest.
It's like too much water, man. I just want to hang out in the sun,
But I'm also like kind of expecting, who would come to your talk. It could be anybody from executives, but it could also really be applied to anybody because, like you said, every thing and every person is always growing and changing. Yeah. And even if you're trying to accomplish personal growth, a lot of these, frameworks could potentially be applied to all sorts of different things in your life. So
I love that. Yes, definitely. The cool thing about some of the models is that they can be applied organizational wide, or they can be applied to a single problem. So, if you kind of drill down and go, okay, well, we've got system-wide issues or system-wide opportunities. How do we capitalize on that? Okay, we've got a business unit that we can capitalize on something. Okay, I have my individual work. How can I approach problem solving in a new and different way? How can I look at growth for the type of work that I do? How can I play around with different mental models over how I'm approaching a problem? So I love that you brought it down to a very individualistic, very human level, because the tools that I'll talk about during the presentation can be used for all the different levels of work that someone might engage from big teams and organizational wide to independent and very task oriented.
Well, you've definitely got one person who will be in the front row right here.
Oh, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
We got one.
Stuff. Yeah. Well, based on the questions we're getting, I think you'll have more than that. So here's a question. You've been to MDMC before. What are you most excited about coming back for?
Having lived all over the country, I really love the Midwest. Yeah, so I spent almost 15 years in California, and I've been in St. Louis for 3. And to me, it's like a hidden gem. The people are really nice. And I love the Midwest hospitality, and I love the intimacy and the openness. It's got a wonderful community, and it's just neat to see our industry come out and everybody kind of play around and have a lot of fun. And I'm very much looking forward to.
We might have dropped for one second.
Excited to watch them talk. It always gives me good laughs, and they give great information.
You dropped off for just a second. Who did you say you were most excited to see?
I'm really excited to see Jeremy from Cool Fire. Oh. Always a great time. Super fun.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Great personality and good guy.
Actually, he's really boring, so I'd say pass on that one. No.
Yep.
Last year, I believe he was even passing out giveaways. So we'll all definitely check that one out. So, we've had some Q&A from the audience. People are already saying that it's not just going to be me. There's more people who are excited to come.
Awesome.
So, kind of a final question to wrap up here. Who are some of the places you go for inspiration or to learn about change and innovation and creativity?
I'm going to pause on that for a second.
Well, I was going to say you had mentioned Marcus Bayer, and I had,
oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah, I've seen him speak before, and it was pretty, powerful.
Yeah, so if I interpret that question as what is, where do I go to kind of think about change and creativity and innovation for me on a very intimate personal level, a lot of that comes through the work that I do with art, a lot of the work that I do with academic research, and just nerding out in my book collection and going to watch people talk, and then spending time around other academics. One of our managing partners, PhD candidate at WashU, spent a lot of time with the researchers and PhDs at WashU and other universities. So, I love being around academic research, particularly applied research, where it's not just theory for the sake of theory. It's theory that's been applied. There's evidence and there's frameworks that go along with it. So there's that work, and then just traveling to different environments, like meeting people, networking, and then going to visit them at their firms and going to look at what's happening in their organization. So I love networking and traveling and meeting with people. What are you working on? How's this working? And then we'll do exploratory sessions. We'll like a firm, we'll read about what they're doing, we'll set up a meeting with them, we'll go out to New York, and we'll just play around in a workshop and start experimenting. So it's a lot of research and reading and playing, and then it's a lot of experimentation. And then of course all the standard things, like there's certain talks I'll go to, and there's conferences that I'll get interested in. A lot of it can come on the research side, and very much on the science.
Well, between education and fun, it sounds like that's a perfect way to wrap up. Speaking of fun, we hope to see everybody join us at Union Station on April 15th through the 18th. And make sure to register and get your tickets at bestmarketingconference.com if you have not already, because you do not want to miss Kevin Farr. All right, everybody. Thank you so much, Kevin. Thank you, Stephanie. And we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks, everybody.